Before the story starts, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
The morning was calm. The sun touched the clean streets softly. Perfect houses stood in lines. Lawns were green. Cars were parked exactly where they should be. This place looked peaceful. But peace was only on the surface. Inside this quiet community lived rules. Too many rules. Rules that controlled everything. And the person who controlled the rules was a woman named Karen. Karen was the HOA president. She had been for years. She knew every house. Every camera. Every fine. People feared her emails more than storms. A wrong trash bin. A wrong paint shade. A car parked 1 inch wrong. Karen noticed everything. That morning, Karen stood near the HOA office window. Coffee in hand. Eyes watching. Then she saw him. A man walking slowly near the edge of the community. He was not wearing a uniform. Not a worker. Not a resident. He walked calmly. Too calmly. Karen narrowed her eyes. "Who is that?" she whispered. The man stopped near a small patch of land. He looked down. He looked around. Then he smiled. That smile bothered Karen. She put down her coffee and walked outside. Her heels hit the ground hard. Fast. Sharp. She reached him and crossed her arms. "Excuse me," she said loudly. "Who are you?" The man turned. He was simple. No expensive clothes. No attitude. "My name is David," he said calmly. Karen did not offer her name. "You are on private HOA property," she said. "You need to leave." David looked around again. "I believe this land belongs to me," he said quietly. Karen laughed. A loud, confident laugh. "That's funny," she said. "This entire community is HOA owned." David stayed calm. "I have documents," he said. Karen's smile tightened. "I hear that all the time," she replied. "Fake papers. Fake claims." People started to notice. A curtain moved. A door opened. Neighbors watched. Karen felt powerful. "This community is protected," she said loudly. "People like you don't just walk in." David nodded. "I understand," he said. Karen did not like that answer. "No fear. No anger." "Then leave," she said. David did not move. He opened a folder slowly. Karen stepped closer. "You don't get it," she snapped. "I can call the police." David looked at her. "That's okay," he said. Those words shocked her. She expected begging. She expected panic. Instead, she felt challenged. Karen pulled out her phone. "You asked for this," she said. She called the police and spoke loudly, clearly. "There is a man trespassing," she said. "He refuses to leave HOA property." David waited quietly. Neighbors whispered. "Who is he? Is he serious? Why is he not scared?" Karen ended the call. "They're coming," she said proudly. Minutes passed. A police car arrived. Karen waved like she owned the street. She rushed to the officers. "This man is illegal," she said. "He has no right to be here." The officer looked at David. "Sir, may I see your ID?" David handed it over calmly. Karen crossed her arms again. "I warned him," she said. "He ignored me." The officer turned to David. "Do you have documents?" he asked. David nodded. "Yes," he said. Karen rolled her eyes. "Here we go," she muttered. David handed over the folder. The officer opened it. His face changed. He read again. Karen's smile slowly faded. The officer looked at his partner. Then back at Karen. "Ma'am," he said carefully. "Can you show HOA land ownership records?" Karen froze. "Our HOA owns everything," she said fast. The officer kept reading. "These are official county documents," he said. David stood quietly. The officer looked up. "This land," he said slowly, "is not listed under the HOA." Silence. Karen laughed nervously. "That's impossible," she said. "There must be a mistake." The officer shook his head. "County records are clear," he said. David finally spoke again. "That land," he said calmly, "belongs to me." Gasps filled the air. Karen stepped back. "That's a lie," she shouted. The officer raised his hand. "We need to verify everything," he said. Karen's voice cracked. "You're embarrassing me," she said. The officer ignored her. David closed his folder. He looked at the houses. Then at Karen. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. Karen did not understand yet. But she would. Because the land beneath their homes held a secret. And that secret was about to destroy everything she controlled. The police car's engine hummed softly as it pulled up to the edge of the community. Its tires crunched on the gravel, loud in the otherwise quiet street. David stayed calm. He watched the officers step out. No panic. No gestures of anger. Just patience. Karen, on the other hand, trembled slightly. Her perfectly styled hair now seemed tense. Her usual confident stride was replaced with hurried, nervous steps. "This is wrong," she whispered loudly, but not too loud, she wanted the neighbors to hear. "They can't just check him." The first officer approached David. Tall, serious, with a badge shining in the sunlight. He studied David carefully. "Sir, can we see your identification?" the officer asked. David reached into his pocket and handed it over. His movements were deliberate. Calm. Controlled. Karen couldn't help herself. "See," she said to the growing crowd. "He's lying. He's trying to confuse you all." David smiled faintly. "Please check the official records," he said quietly. "They will confirm everything." Karen laughed sharply, a sound that didn't reach the nerves it once did. "Records can be forged," she shouted. "He wants to scare us." Neighbors peered from behind windows and doors. Some whispered to each other. Some held their phones, recording. Karen felt the crowd's attention shift. She realized they were listening to David now, not her. The officer glanced at the documents David had provided. His face was neutral, unreadable. He walked back to his car slowly, muttering into his radio. Karen followed him, stepping heavily, like a general trying to command her troops. "This man is dangerous," she whispered to herself. "He will ruin everything I've built." David remained still. The breeze ruffled his hair slightly. He looked around at the quiet houses, the lawns, the people watching. Nothing about him betrayed nervousness or worry. Minutes passed. The officer returned. His eyes were different this time, curious, cautious. Karen straightened. She prepared her strongest smile, but it didn't work. It faltered. "Sir," the officer said, addressing David. "Can you explain why you are here today?" David nodded. "I am checking the land I legally own," he said simply. "I plan to build a fence along the property lines." A soft murmur passed through the crowd. "A fence? Under these houses? Impossible." Karen's eyes widened. "You can't build anything here," she shouted. "This is our community." David looked at her, calm as ever. "I will not touch the homes," he said. "Only my property lines." Karen's hands trembled. Her voice cracked. "You don't understand," she shouted. "These people paid HOA fees for years. You have no right." David tilted his head slightly. I understand your position, he said. But fees do not give ownership. The officer cleared his throat, stepping between them. Ma'am, he said firmly. Can you provide ownership proof for the HOA? Karen froze. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Swallowed. We have records, she said quickly. Contracts. Agreements. The officer's eyes narrowed. Agreements are not deeds, he said. We need proof of legal ownership. Karen's breath quickened. Her control over the situation slipped. The neighbors watched silently, holding their collective breath. One man whispered, "Do we even own our homes?" Karen shot him a glare, but it no longer intimidated anyone. The officer turned back to David. "Sir, do you have documents?" David nodded. "I do," he said. "Official county documents, signed and verified." He opened his folder slowly, deliberately, and handed the pages to the officer. Karen tried to laugh it off. "Fake," she said. "Anyone can print papers." The officer read. The quiet was deafening. His face changed. He read again. A line, then another. Karen's confident mask began to crack. The officer whispered something to his partner. Karen's heart pounded. This can't be real," she muttered. Finally, the officer looked at her. "Ma'am," he said carefully. "These documents show something unexpected." Karen swallowed hard. She tried to stay in control. "What is it?" she demanded. The officer's voice was calm, steady. "This land is not owned by the HOA." Silence. The neighbors gasped. Karen laughed nervously, the sound brittle. "No! That's impossible," she shouted. "This community has always been HOA land." David finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "The land beneath your homes," he said slowly, "is mine." The crowd froze. Mouths opened. Some stepped back. Some whispered, "He owns it?" Karen stepped back, her face turning pale. "This is a lie," she shouted. "He is lying." The officer raised his hand. "We need to verify everything," he said firmly. "No arrests. No decisions. Just verification." Karen's voice shook. "You're humiliating me," she cried. David remained calm. He closed his folder. Looked at Karen. Then at the houses. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. Karen blinked. Her confidence crumbled. Her kingdom of fear and control was starting to collapse, and she could feel it. Outside, neighbors whispered among themselves. "What if he's right? Why didn't we know? Could HOA have lied to us all this time?" Karen stormed back into the office, slamming the door behind her. Her hands were shaking. Her heart raced. David stopped walking. He turned and looked at the red brick houses. The quiet community that had always felt so untouchable now seemed fragile, exposed. "This isn't over," Karen whispered from behind the locked door. David smiled faintly. "I know," he said. Because now, the real story was about to begin. And the HOA had no idea what was coming. The next morning arrived quietly, almost too quietly. The streets were clean, the sun shone over perfectly trimmed lawns, and the houses looked the same as always. But the air felt heavy. Something had shifted. The calm was no longer comforting, it was tense. Inside the HOA office, Karen sat alone. She had not slept well. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened old files that smelled of dust and secrets. Years of meticulous record-keeping had once given her power, but today, those papers were a trap. "Where is it?" she whispered to herself. Her eyes scanned the stacks of folders, searching for a particular document. A paper that had been buried long ago, intentionally ignored. It was small, nearly invisible, but it held the truth that could destroy the community she had controlled for years. She finally found it. A small envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with a faded stamp. Karen's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her eyes scanned the lines, her face pale with fear. It was a legal disclaimer from decades ago. It clearly stated, land ownership remains separate from the housing structures. Homeowners possess rights to buildings, not the land itself. Karen's memory flashed. She remembered the lawyers, the warnings, the meetings she had attended but ignored. The builders had cautioned them. You must tell the residents, the lawyer had said. The land is leased. Ownership is not absolute. But Karen had ignored the warning. She had ignored the truth. She had chosen control over honesty. And now, the consequences were coming back. Outside, David walked again, as quietly as the morning breeze. He carried no anger, no weapon, no malice. Just calm determination. This time, he was not alone. A surveyor followed him, carrying red flags, measuring tools, and maps. Neighbors began to notice movement. Curtains shifted. Phones appeared. Whispers started circulating. Karen stepped outside. She saw them and froze. Her pulse quickened. The surveyor's presence meant trouble. Big trouble. You are not allowed here, Karen shouted, but her voice lacked the sharpness it once had. David stopped and turned. I have permission from the city, he said calmly. They approved the survey. We are marking property boundaries. Karen's laugh was hollow. This is harassment. You cannot just. But David remained silent, his eyes scanning the properties. Calm. Collected. The surveyor began placing red flags along the edges of the land. Each flag stood like a small warning, snapping gently in the wind. Karen tried to remove one, but the city's warning emails flashed in her mind. Do not interfere. Do not touch. Neighbors stepped onto the sidewalks, peering curiously, whispering to one another. Karen realized something terrifying. The crowd was paying attention to David. They were watching her crumble. One elderly man stepped forward. He leaned on his cane, his voice trembling but firm. I remember something, he said. When we bought our homes, the contracts were unusual, strange language. Karen's heart skipped a beat. She felt exposed. Another neighbor joined. Mine too, she whispered. It said the land was leased, but I didn't understand it. Karen's hands shook. She wanted to scream. Those are lies, she shouted. Do not listen. But the room of neighbors had shifted. They were no longer under her control. The air vibrated with questions, confusion, and dawning realization. David remained calm. He didn't need to argue. He let the evidence speak for itself. The surveyor finished his measurements. He handed a set of papers to David. These lines are accurate, he said. His voice was professional but carried weight. Karen's phone rang. She answered quickly, her voice sharp. But the conversation was short. Her face went pale. Her hands gripped the phone so tightly the knuckles whitened. Yes, she said. No, that cannot be, she whispered. Yes, I understand. She hung up slowly. Her empire of control was cracking. David watched quietly as Karen stumbled back into the office. She slammed the door, but the sound did little to hide her panic. Outside, the community watched the red flags snapping in the breeze. They were symbols, markers of truth. Neighbors whispered. He owns it. He really owns it. Karen leaned against her desk, breathing heavily. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. The perfect image of power she had maintained for years was gone. David took a step forward. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply spoke. This is why I am here, he said quietly. Not to hurt anyone. Not to take revenge. I am here for fairness and the truth. The crowd was silent. The tension was thick, palpable. Karen's voice broke the silence. You want control. You want to take our homes, she yelled. David shook his head. I want justice. That is all. For the first time, Karen realized she was alone. She had no allies left. The neighbors had stopped listening to her. The officers had already observed enough to question her actions. Outside, the red flags fluttered, each one a reminder of a lie that had been hidden too long. Karen's empire was built on secrets, but secrets cannot survive forever. The elderly man leaned forward again. We trusted you, he said. Karen closed her eyes, tears forming, realizing the weight of the truth she had buried. David looked over the community one last time, his gaze steady and unwavering. He whispered softly, just enough for himself to hear, prepare yourselves. The truth cannot be hidden anymore. The sun shone down, illuminating the red flags snapping gently in the wind. The quiet houses, once symbols of order and control, now stood as witnesses to the unraveling of lies. And Karen, the woman who once controlled everything, realized that her power had no foundation. It was only a matter of time before the law, the city, and the truth would strip her of everything she had built. David walked away calmly, leaving the flags behind, leaving the tension behind, but carrying the certainty that the real battle had only just begun. The community, once blinded by rules, was beginning to see clearly. And the secret they had all ignored for years, the secret Karen tried to bury, was finally coming to light. The red flags did not move. They stood in the ground all night, silent and unmoved, like witnesses that refused to leave. When the sun rose again over the community, the flags were still there, bright, bold, and impossible to ignore. Karen watched them from her office window. Her coffee sat untouched on the desk. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Emails. Messages. Complaints. For the first time in years, Karen felt powerless. She wanted to go outside and pull the flags out herself. She wanted to erase them, pretend they were never there. But the city had warned her clearly. Do not touch the survey markers. Interfering will result in penalties. Karen slammed her fist on the desk. This is my community, she whispered angrily. But deep inside, she knew something terrifying. It was no longer hers. By evening, the HOA emergency meeting was announced. Karen had no choice. Too many questions. Too many angry residents. If she stayed silent, she would lose everything faster. The meeting room filled quickly. Every chair was taken. People stood against the walls. Some stood outside the door, listening. Karen sat at the front table, stiff and silent. Her usual confident posture was gone. Her smile was forced. Her eyes avoided the crowd. David sat quietly at the back. He was not invited by Karen. He was there because the city requested it. Karen saw him and felt her stomach twist. She stood suddenly and banged the table. This meeting is about HOA rules, she said loudly. Not rumors and lies. The room stayed quiet. A man raised his hand. Do we own the land under our homes? He asked. Karen ignored him. A woman stood up. Why didn't you tell us about the lease? Karen snapped. There is no lease problem, she shouted. You are being manipulated. Murmurs filled the room. David slowly stood up. I am not here to fight, he said calmly. I am here because this meeting involves land I legally own. The room froze. Karen turned red. You have no right to speak here, she yelled. This is an HOA meeting. David walked forward and placed a document on the table. This document says otherwise, he said. Karen rushed forward. Do not read that, she screamed. But it was too late. People leaned in. Eyes scanned the page. Faces changed. A woman gasped. This says the land is leased, she whispered. Another man asked. For how long? David answered calmly. 99 years, he said. Signed before the homes were built. The room erupted. What? No one told us. We paid full price. Karen slammed her hand again. Enough, she screamed. This meeting is over. No one moved. They were no longer afraid of her. Karen pointed at David. He wants to take your homes, she shouted. David shook his head. I never said that, he replied. I want fair agreements. Nothing more. Karen began pacing. Her voice cracked. You are destroying this community. A man stood up and said quietly. No, Karen. You did. That sentence hit harder than any insult. Karen froze. She looked around the room. No one defended her. Her phone buzzed again. She checked it. Her lawyer. She answered quickly. Yes, she said, turning away. Her face drained of color. What do you mean the city is involved? No, I didn't disclose that document. She ended the call slowly. Her hands shook. Karen grabbed her bag. This is harassment, she said weakly. I am calling my lawyer again. She rushed out of the room. People followed. Outside, police cars were parked near the HOA office. Karen stopped walking. Her breath caught. An officer approached her. Ma'am, he said calmly. We need access to HOA financial and land records. Karen dropped her keys. What? She whispered. City request, the officer continued. There are reports of undisclosed land agreements. Karen turned to the residents. You believe him over me? She shouted. No one answered. The officer repeated. Please cooperate. Karen's knees felt weak. She sat down on the curb. For the first time, Karen was not standing above anyone. She was below them. Inside the HOA office, officers sealed cabinets. Computers were removed. Files were boxed. Years of control disappeared in minutes. David stood at a distance, watching quietly. A woman approached him. We treated you badly, she said. We are sorry. David nodded. I understand fear, he replied. But fear does not excuse lies. The red flags moved slightly in the wind. Karen stared at them. They no longer looked small. They looked powerful. Her kingdom had fallen, not with noise or violence, but with truth. She buried her face in her hands. David looked at the community one last time. The battle was no longer hidden. And there was no turning back. The truth did not explode. It did not arrive with shouting or chaos. It arrived quietly. The next morning, city vehicles parked outside the HOA office. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just calm, serious movement. Men and women in plain clothes stepped inside, carrying folders and clipboards. Karen sat alone in the office. Her chair felt too big now. The walls that once made her feel powerful now felt like they were closing in. Her phone lay silent on the desk. No messages. No support. No allies. A city lawyer entered. We need all HOA records, he said calmly. Land agreements. Financial documents. Emails. Karen nodded slowly. She did not argue. She handed over the keys. Boxes were opened. Old files came out. Dust filled the air. Years of control were unpacked piece by piece. Outside, residents gathered quietly. No shouting. No arguing. Just waiting. David stood among them. He said nothing. He watched. Hours passed. Papers were reviewed. Emails were printed. Signatures were checked. Then the lawyer stepped outside. His face was serious. We found the original land agreement, he said. Everyone moved closer. Karen stood in the doorway. Her hands trembled. The lawyer continued. Years ago, before the homes were built, the HOA signed a land lease. A wave of shock passed through the crowd. Not ownership, he said clearly. A lease. A woman covered her mouth. A man whispered, "We never knew." Karen closed her eyes. The lawyer held up a document. This lease was never disclosed to the residents. Silence. Someone shouted, "We paid full price." Another voice said, "We were lied to." Karen spoke weakly. "I was protecting the community," she said. David looked at her calmly. "By hiding the truth?" he asked. Karen's voice broke. "I thought it would never matter," she said. "I thought no one would find out." The lawyer shook his head. "It always matters," he said. "And someone always finds out." More documents were revealed. Emails where lawyers warned the HOA. Messages Karen ignored. Approval emails with her signature. Every paper pointed to the same truth. Karen knew. And she stayed silent. The crowd grew angry. "You stole from us. You used us." Karen stepped back. Her power was gone. The lawyer spoke again. "There is more," he said. Everyone went quiet. "The land was sold legally," he continued. "To a private buyer." All eyes turned to David. He nodded once. "I followed the law," he said. "The sale was public." Karen whispered, "I hoped no one would notice." The lawyer looked at her. "You approved the transaction," he said. Karen collapsed into a chair. The lie had fully broken. A woman asked softly, "What happens to our homes?" The lawyer answered calmly. "The homes are safe," he said. "But the land agreements must change." Relief mixed with anger. David stepped forward. "I am not here to take anything," he said. "I want fair, clear agreements." People listen now. A man lowered his head. "We trusted the wrong person," he said. Karen stood slowly. "I built this HOA," she whispered. A voice replied from the crowd. "You destroyed it." Police officers stepped closer. Karen was escorted out. Not in handcuffs. But her future was no longer in her control. The HOA office door closed behind her. For the first time, it stayed closed. David looked at the building. Power built on lies never lasts. He felt no joy. Only calm. Because truth had finally won. But the story was not over yet. The next chapter would decide what kind of man David truly was. The community felt empty. Not because people had left, but because something important was gone. Trust. The gates still opened and closed. The streets were still clean. The houses still stood tall. But the heart of the community was broken. A city notice was placed at the entrance. HOA under legal review. Everyone saw it. People slowed their cars to read it. Some stopped and took photos. Some shook their heads in silence. The HOA office stayed closed. Lights off. Doors locked. Karen never returned. No goodbye speech. No apology meeting. Only a short letter appeared on the HOA website. "I believed I was protecting the community." That was all. No one responded. Residents stopped paying HOA fees. They did not know where the money went anymore. They did not know who was in charge. The city stepped in. HOA bank accounts were frozen. Audits began. Years of financial records were opened. Every payment was checked. Every signature was reviewed. Strange expenses appeared. Consulting fees. Legal silence payments. Private transfers. All approved by Karen. The truth hurt. People gathered in small groups. They talked quietly. "We trusted her. How could this happen? We should have asked questions. David walked through the community again. This time, no one stopped him. No one challenged him. People nodded when they saw him. Some looked ashamed. A man approached him slowly. "We treated you badly," he said. "We believed her." David listened. "I understand fear," he replied calmly. "But fear should never replace truth." The city formed a temporary committee. No power. No titles. Just residents. They invited David to speak. The meeting was held outside, in the open park. No locked doors. No raised voices. David stood in front of them. Not as an enemy. Not as a ruler. Just a man. A woman spoke first. "What do you want from us?" she asked. David answered honestly. "I want clarity," he said. "Fair land agreements. No hidden rules." People listened carefully. No one interrupted. A man asked, "Why didn't you fight us?" David paused. "Because truth does not need shouting," he said. "It only needs time." The city released another statement. HOA leadership officially removed. New elections required after legal review. Applause followed. Not loud. Not happy. Relieved. The HOA, once feared, was now powerless. The rules that controlled everything were gone. People felt free. But also lost. Without rules, they had to face something harder. Responsibility. David received a letter from the city. Land ownership fully confirmed. No disputes. He read it slowly. Years of patience had worked. But victory did not feel like triumph. It felt like responsibility. Children played in the streets again. Neighbors talked more. The community was changing. A woman stopped David one afternoon. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" he asked. "For not becoming like her," she replied. David smiled slightly. Power can destroy. Or it can heal. The choice was always there. At night, David stood near the edge of the land. The red flags were gone now. The ground looked peaceful again. But the lesson remained. Lies can build tall walls. But truth breaks them silently. The HOA was gone. But something new was waiting to be built. And everyone knew the final decision was still ahead. The community waited. Not loudly. Not angrily. Quietly. For weeks after the HOA collapsed, nothing happened. No fences went up. No rent notices appeared. No warnings were posted. That silence scared people more than Karen ever had. Because silence meant choice. And the choice belonged to David. Every resident knew it. They whispered about it at night. They talked about it while walking dogs, while watering lawns, while standing at bus stops. What will he do? Will he raise the rent? Will we lose our homes? David heard none of it. He walked the land early each morning. Slow steps. Hands in his pockets. He looked at the houses. Children's bikes on driveways. Flowers near windows. Small signs of life. This was not just land. This was home for hundreds of families. One evening, David sent a message. A final meeting. Not in the HOA office. Not behind walls. In the open park. The day of the meeting, people arrived early. Some stood. Some sat on the grass. Some held hands. David arrived alone. No lawyers. No guards. Just him. He stood quietly until the crowd settled. "I know you are afraid," he began. His voice was calm. Clear. "I would be afraid too." A woman in the front wiped her eyes. David continued. "You think I waited for years just to punish you," he said. You think I want revenge? He paused. I do not. The crowd leaned in. When I bought this land, David said, I knew what power meant. He looked around. Power can destroy people. Or it can protect them. He took out a folder. People tensed. But instead of legal threats, he pulled out a simple paper. These are new land agreements, he said. Clear. Honest. Fair. A man spoke. Will we have to leave? David shook his head. No, he said. You will stay. Relief moved through the crowd like wind. Another voice asked, What about rent? David nodded. Low. Stable. Long-term, he said. So families can plan their lives. People looked at each other. This was not what they expected. I could have raised prices, David continued. I could have forced people out. He paused. But then I would become the very thing that hurt you. Silence. David looked toward the empty HOA office. For years, fear controlled this place, he said. Rules without truth. Power without honesty. He looked back at the people. I will not repeat that mistake. A child ran across the grass, laughing. David smiled. Someone asked quietly, What about Karen? David took a breath. She will face the law, he said. But I do not wish her harm. The city's decision came weeks later. Karen was charged. Not loudly. No cameras. No drama. Just justice. The HOA was officially dissolved. The gates were removed. The signs came down. People painted their homes without fear. Neighbors talked again. Trust began to grow slowly. One evening, a woman stopped David. Why did you do this? She asked. David thought for a moment. Because silence taught me something, he said. When people stay quiet long enough, truth rises. The land stayed peaceful. No fences. No barriers. Just understanding. Years later, people would tell the story. About the HOA that fell. About the woman who ruled with fear. And about the quiet man. They would say, he owned the land beneath their homes. And chose kindness instead of revenge. David stood one final time at the edge of the community. The sun was setting. He looked back. Power did not come from control. It came from choice. And the strongest choice he ever made was mercy.
Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed it.